It's wonderful to be able to do my now second preach here. The first one was about a couple of hours ago. And I think actually anyone listening to this one might need to listen to the first one as well, because I think I'm going to do a few things differently. I ran out of time this morning, so I've stripped out loads of stuff so I can still get to the ending, and I've got a timer on me this time. The joys of having someone coming for a first preach, eh? So it's lovely to see some old faces. Oh, I'm getting old anyway. And some new faces, which is great. So we've got, for those of you who did know me from before, I thought I'd just give you an update of our family. The boys have grown up significantly. So this was last year, this Josh's passing out parade. I don't know why they call it passing out, but anyway, I'm sure there's a good reason. But he's now a police officer, which if you ever wondered why police officers are now looking much younger than they used to, it's because they're my son's age. And obviously we've got Matthew there as well. So Matthew is doing really well. For those of you who know, I just want to thank you for all of you who stood with us in prayer and just support a couple of years ago when Matthew was diagnosed with cancer. It's been a very long, tough road, but the last 6 months he's really made a really big turn and is doing really, really well now. So that's wonderful. Graham and I are doing well. We're enjoying the seaside. Things are going well. We've been married for 27 years now, which is quite exciting. And one of the things I wanted to do, obviously, to sort of let you know where we are, so I moved away not back up to Norfolk, but up to Norfolk 11 years ago, 2008. And since I've been up there, I've been involved, I've sort of carried on with my involvement with people who are in need. That's what I did for a number of years down here with Cornerstone. Got Liz here today. Thanks for coming in, Liz. And it was something that was a lot of our hearts and a lot of our attention for many years. And working here in Bishop Stortford and over in Harlow, really trying to express God's love for the poor and those in need in a very practical way. But one of the things I found when we started here with an office and a desk and a computer, and we started working with some guys around the corner at the YMCA. And one of the things that really surprised me and shocked me to start with was how difficult it was for those young men to accept that people cared about them, to really take that on board, because they had sort of written themselves off by the time they got to 18, 19, 20. And that for me was sort of really, really difficult to take, because for me, well, if you messed up a bit as a young person, fine, you've got your whole adult life ahead of you, let's turn things around. And it was like, no, it's never going to change, I'm never going to amount to anything. And you sort of heard the stuff coming out of their mouths that potentially has been spoken to them over the years. And so we had to spend quite a lot of time just building relationship, building trust, helping these young men to see that there was hope for the future. And so I've always been passionate about making sure, or wanting to be part of a church that makes a difference in its local community. I want to be part of a church that's missed if it's not there, that is good news wherever it is. Because God's heart is, yes, he loves us coming and worshipping him, but he loves the community outside of our doors that aren't in here. And the church is the answer. Unfortunately, we are God's answer. And you look at it sometimes and you think, oh my word, God, couldn't you come up with a better plan? Because, wow, I'm not sure I'm up to the job. But God certainly has decided that this is it. And we are it. And so we need to be empowered by him to try and make sure that we give it our best shot. And that's all I can ever do. That's all any of us can ever do, really. But once I've been up in Great Yarmouth, I've been with Great Yarmouth. It's now called Kingsgate Church in Great Yarmouth. And I've continued to work with folks up there. I've recently taken on a part-time role as community manager there. And I'm also the chair of trustees. And then I've also, alongside my Kingsgate work, I've been working with Relational Mission, which is absolutely fantastic and somehow ended up leading Pathways from Poverty. I think sometimes if you get in right at the start, you end up just carrying on being part of it. And Mike started talking about the need to remember the poor, and was talking about activities in Kenya and stuff like that. And I said, what about the poor in the UK? And he said, I don't know. What about the poor in the UK? Tell me about them. And so, sorry, Mike, that might have sounded really bad. But it was really just looking at how do we, as local churches, impact our local communities, those who are in need in our communities. And so Relational Mission is the family of churches that we're all part of, and it feels like a family. So the church that I'm at is part of Relational Mission, you're part of Relational Mission, lots of churches are part of Relational Mission. And together, we can work together to share our knowledge, skills and experiences, help each other, support each other, encourage each other. And Mike Betts is going to be coming down apparently in January to talk a bit more about RM, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But I am a trustee of RM as well, so I've got access to lots of slides and stuff like that, but I decided I better not do that. And to be honest, I've got way too much material anyway to do that. But locally, we're all part of God's big picture. We don't sit in our own little sphere and sort of just run around in our own without impacting or being impacted by others. So we want to be on a mission together. We've got much more strength when we're together. There's much more that we can do in bringing life-transforming hope to people's lives if we're doing it together. And we're all working, really. I'm working towards the outworking of the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And until that happens, I reckon we've still got some work to do. So Pathways from Poverty was created to really help ensure that God's heart for the poor was part of the DNA of every church in Relational Mission. So we didn't want to sort of lose it or just have it as a side add-on. It's really part of our core heart in what we're doing. So when we start looking at the poor or thinking about the poor, some of us might have a number of thoughts going through our heads. Does poverty still really exist in the UK? Who are the poor? Even if there are needs, surely it's somebody else's responsibility. I've got nothing to offer. What difference can I make into this? Actually, does the fact that there are people living in poverty around me actually really need to make a difference to me? Does it need to matter? That's a personal decision you've got to do, but God tells us that it matters to him, and he's been really clear about it. Anyone that's read the Bible will probably notice every part of the Bible has got God's heart for the poor running through it. It's a golden thread throughout the books of the Old Testament, New Testament, the Psalms and the Proverbs. It's there all the time, and God didn't leave it down to human kindness to sort of say, oh, just be nice to the poor, please. He put very specific instructions in place. He was very, very intentional to make sure that the church, his people, protected and provided for the poor. So I'm just going to run through a few of them because I could be here all morning just talking about those. So I've got a few here. Leviticus talks about the edges of your fields being kept or not gleaned so that the foreigner and the poor amongst you can take of them. Similarly with grapes that have fallen on the floor. Isaiah talks about learning to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless and plead the case of the widow. God also states that looking after the poor was an act of worship to him, and amazingly comes with blessings. So in Matthew, come you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world, because when I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was a stranger, you invited me in. When I needed clothes, you clothed me. When I was sick, you looked after me. When I was in prison, you came and visited me. Ooh. Sorry, I've gone too Some of there's loads and loads of chapters everywhere, but Isaiah 58, I'm on the right bit. Such a well-known one, but it's so much of God's heart for the poor and the blessing on us if and when we do what he calls us to do. Is this not the kind of fasting I've chosen? To loose the chains of injustice, untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, and when you see the naked to clothe them and not turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and I shouldn't have turned around. And your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. Amazing. If you do away with the yoke of oppression with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourself on behalf of the hungry and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. We have an amazing God who really does want us to be making a difference to people's lives. Proverbs, he who is kind to the poor lends to the Lord. and he'll reward them for what he's done. James 1:27, religion that our God and Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after the orphans and widows in their distress and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Live such good lives, sorry if I got these the wrong way around, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Do not forget to do good, to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased. Who amongst us doesn't want God to be pleased with us? And then when we start talking about remember the poor, we have a very classic one, Galatians 2:10. The only thing that James, Peter and John asked of Paul when he was encouraged to keep on preaching the gospel to the Gentiles was that they would continue to remember the poor, the very thing he was eager to do. This is foundational apostolic biblical principle for every church. This is what God wants us to be involved in. But so, who are the poor? It's quite a good question, actually. We often talk about the poor in economic terms, and a lot of the Bible is talking about actually economic poverty, people without income or with low incomes who need additional help. But there are other people also in the Bible that are talked about. But in our society now, there is poverty in all sorts of areas, and there's some other dimensions which are talked about in A Church for the Poor that Natalie Williams and Martin Charlesworth have written from Jubilee Plus, and it's definitely worth a read. But these run through sort of economic poverty, where people are lacking in enough income. Aspirational poverty is about a loss of hope. Sorry, I haven't quite worked this clicker very well yet. Aspiration is about believing that it's possible to change, that there is positive change is open to everybody, but to lose that hope is very tragic if there's a loss of hope. Relational poverty, the loss of community. We're all social creatures. Most of us function best in community. We need people around us. We need friends. Helping people to connect with the church, family can help people to feel a sense of belonging and improve health and well-being for sure. And then the last one we've got is spiritual poverty, the loss of ultimate meaning. We're living in a very secular world now where most of our Christian heritage is getting blown away. And we need to make sure that we don't neglect spiritual issues when we're actually addressing material needs with the poor. In fact, many people want to discuss spiritual matters in times of crisis and in times of need. Thank you. One of the things that, when I took on working with Pathways and Poverty. So I really wanted to hear God's heart for the poor. I wanted to get a fresh vision from him as to what he saw, what he wanted us to do, what difference he wanted to make. I wanted to see what it looked like in heaven, really. So we were talking about when heaven comes down to earth. What does that actually look like? And so I spent a very long time, for me, 9 months continually praying for God to give me something that would never leave me, that would keep me going through good, the bad, and the ugly. And to be honest, that's a really good place to get to with God. And so one day I was just carrying on praying, and actually it was in a leaders' meeting, and God just said to me, "I want to show you something." And I had this sort of vision where God took me to a dark cave-like place, which was something like a viewing chamber in an aquarium or a large reptile house. It had glass, solid glass down each side, and light coming from behind it. I'm afraid I'm going to have to read this out from my phone, because last night when I was going through my slides, when I was down here, I realised I'd left it at home, which wasn't very helpful. Fortunately, I found it. So as I walked towards the glass, which was very thick and heavy, and could see that there were individual rooms sectioned off with scenes happening, which you could clearly see, but they were obviously not intended to be seen. I saw all that was going on the other side of the glass, that was being done in the dark, that was hidden and secret. No one knew they were being watched or that their actions were being seen. Every room had a scene of horror in it. Every kind of physical, mental abuse of the young, the old, the vulnerable, and every aspect of human deprivation was on display. There was nothing I could do from where I was viewing it to stop any of it. Even if I banged on the glass, I knew I wouldn't be seen or heard, and I was aware that this was just a small fraction of what God sees day in, day out across our world. I was also aware that he knew all and saw all of these scenes simultaneously and continuously. Whilst I was looking at these horrendous scenes in front of me, I said to God, what can we do to reach these people, to stop the horror? And as I asked, I saw a light dropping into the darkness in one of the rooms. The light lit up the room for a time and changed the atmosphere, bringing warmth and hope for a while to the person who was trapped in there. And I asked God what the little light was. And he told me that these lights were prayers, and that each prayer brings God's light and hope into dark places. Then as I was watching, I saw 2 people come in through the door into the room. One person was dark, but one was full of light, and the light lit up the whole room so that none of it was dark anymore. The light changed the atmosphere and reduced the control and the power that evil had over the person in the room. The person with the light was someone with God's Holy Spirit in them. And they walked in with a professional, a police officer, social worker, community worker. But the professional was not able to change the atmosphere. Only thing that brought light and hope was God's Spirit and presence shining out of the Christian. Further down the long corridor, as far as I could see, the glass wall went on to the distance, and scenes behind it continued too. There was suffering due to drought and famine, corruption and greed. There were lonely people, homeless people, hungry people, cold people, hopeless people, confused people, anxious people, and frightened people. These are the poor that we have all around us, that God sees. These are the people that God cares about. These are people that we've been worshipping this morning, a God who's sitting on a throne, he's on high. But we actually have a God who is intimately, painfully aware of the suffering of people across the world, all around us. He knows what's going on in our community. And when we have these rooms, behind these rooms there was a bit of a matrix, because these people could come out of these rooms. And they did come out of the rooms. They came out of these rooms and they engaged with community. They took their kids to school. They went shopping. Some of them even come to church. And those are our opportunities to meet with people. Those are the opportunities to build the relationships and the friendships where we can start to bring hope. We can start to bring life. We can start to see that we are the hope bringers into the community around us. These are the opportunities that we have every day to be the answer, because God says we are the answer. Our prayers are the answer. Us walking into people's lives, into people's situations, bringing God's love, bringing God's care into those different situations are what changes the atmosphere. It's what changes people's lives. It's what changes people's hearts. To us, it feels like we're just going around for a coffee. That's what it looks like to us. When you walk into this room, you don't realise what you're bringing in. You don't realise what's going on around you. Sometimes you do. Often we don't. But seeing it from the other side and just seeing the impact, the difference it makes in the spiritual dimensions, the enemy just doesn't have a chance. How many of us recognise what we've got inside us? The Holy Spirit coming in, us just being kind, saying hello, building a friendship, smiling at people, transforms lives. But it's never a quick fix. It's always going to be walking, most of the time it's going to be walking with people for the long haul, loving, caring, supporting and encouraging and valuing people. Because the longer someone feels and goes hopeless, the less able they are to see that there's a better future ever for them. They feel utterly trapped, utterly hopeless. And they need people to come alongside. They need people to lift their eyes. We all need people to lift our eyes, lift our spirits. And we know that ultimately Jesus is the only one that can bring lasting hope for the future and transformation into people's lives. So we want to give people the opportunity to meet him for themselves and allow his blood, his love to make a difference and bring the changes. I know as a church, you guys have always been wanting to have a heart that makes a difference in a local community, and I applaud you for that. I love that when I was here, and I love the fact that loads of those things are still going on and there's lots of new stuff going on. And I'm also aware from Peter that it's not just the local community that you care about, that very regularly that you're supporting, encouraging and financially blessing ministries in communities across the nations. And that's fantastic. So keep going with that. That's absolutely brilliant. So Pathways from Poverty is really looking at trying as a church, a family of churches together, to make sure that we are people empowering, poverty alleviating and community transforming. That's what we want to be doing together, creating lasting impact. So how can we do that? We want to be making the most of the opportunities that we've been given. We have opportunities that sometimes are very, very inconvenient. Opportunities don't always land when we've got the time and the inclination. They sometimes land when we're really tired, we're really busy, we've got lots of other things going on in life. We also know that sometimes we actually miss opportunities because we're too busy. And sometimes we don't actually want to acknowledge them. But sometimes we can actually start intentionally looking for them. And so these opportunities that we've got, we're talking about loving our neighbour. Jesus says that he wants us to love God and love our neighbour. So how do we actually do that? Well, what do we do when we hear God's voice prompting us to do something inconvenient or outside of our comfort zone? Do we worry about whether we're going to be well received or whether we're going to be rejected? But some of the opportunities we might want to keep our eyes and ears open for. Noticing and thanking someone at church, at work, friend, family member who's put themselves out on behalf of others or has faithfully served behind the scenes. Smiling or talking to someone who looks a bit sad or lonely. Stopping to pray with somebody who's just told you something that they're concerned about rather than saying that you'll do it later. Phoning someone you know is unwell, asking if you can take any shopping round, getting any shopping for them, take a meal round for them, taking the opportunity to get to know people who are different from you, finding about their lives, their experiences, their hopes for the future. Befriending someone that you know is lonely or isolated, taking the opportunity to talk to somebody about Jesus. Considering how we use our time, talents and treasures and what opportunities there might be to be a blessing to others. Find out what opportunities have been created by the church to do good in the community that you can get involved in. There are so many different ways. I thought it was my phone for a moment. There are so many different ways that we can do it, and all of us can make a difference. All of us can make a difference in our local communities. And it doesn't need to be the big stuff, it can be the really little stuff. But we're given opportunities every single day. Hebrews 10:24 says, "Let us consider how we can spur one another on towards love and good deeds." And we've got opportunities now, I think, across the nation which are unique. We've got situations where statutory and other services are reducing and shutting. And the church is starting to be noticed for its longevity, its service, and its community heart. And we are going to be getting more and more opportunities to make a difference in our local community. We're not just going to be like, oh, we'll put up with them. We're going to be welcomed and invited to make a difference. And so this is our time to be prepared as a church. This is our time to be able to look at it and go, are we ready to increase our impact? Are we individually and together as churches? What are the things that we can do that are going to make a difference? Because who knows what God can do through a company of people who are willing to put themselves out to act according to God's promptings and make the most of every opportunity to do good. So, we've got an opportunity today to do some good, to a project that I've got to know really well, because the Pathways and Poverty Christmas Appeal is something that I do. And we've got an opportunity today to make a difference and transform lives with churches across Relational Mission to come together to make a difference to Lucy and her community. Now, Lucy seems like a lovely, lovely lady. She just happened to be tending her goats when Edward Berea and the team who were doing the Pathways and Poverty filming turned up. And she just happened to be talking about where we were planning on putting a borehole. She just talked about the sort of kilometres that she was cycling every day just to get water. And she'd been given a dream a few years back about water coming out of the ground where they were standing on and actually being available to her community. And God had given her that dream the week before, again, the film crew turned up. So for me, this is like, okay, this is God sitting there looking at Lucy and going, right, I want my church to make a difference here. And we turn up and we hear it like, okay, this is what God wants us to do. Let's get behind it. And that's what this appeal is about. So I will let Lucy and Edward tell the story, and hopefully you will be able to get on board with what God's up to.
Each year, through our Pathways from Poverty initiative, we hold a Christmas appeal that helps provide long-term sustainable solutions to empower people living in great need.
A special thanks to all the churches that are part of Relational Mission. For the last couple of years, you have given generously. And even before I can talk about the coming appeal, I really want you to hear my heart on behalf of the thousands of people I represent. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted that we're returning to Kenya again this year with our Christmas appeal. Our aim is to bring life-sustaining water and hope for a better future for thousands of people living in rural areas. Areas where cycles of flooding and droughts threaten both lives and livelihoods as crops that were once flourishing fail and limited precious water supplies run dry. Our appeal this year is to help raise in excess of £50,000 or €58,000 to construct a substantial borehole to bring a constant supply of water to a community in great need.
Just meeting Mrs. Quiria, who is a neighbor here. She travels so many kilometers using a bicycle, and she takes almost like a whole day just fetching for one jerrycan of water. Yeah, the only place that we can be able to get some water, it's across those mountains there, across those valleys out there. And the things she has just spoken to us are just amazing, because it's all to do with really confirming to us that what we are about to do here, it's God-led.
We have an opportunity today to bring hope to the lives of thousands of people, people like Lucy. So let's stand together and give generously, demonstrating God's heart for the poor. He knows and remembers people who are living in great need. Let us play our part in seeing lives saved and communities transformed for years to come. Together, let's bring joy and hope to people like Lucy, to stop her having to cycle long distances every day just to fetch water, empowering her instead to step onto a pathway out of poverty. Thank you.
She says that we will be the happiest village when this water is finally here. God bless you, and thank you so much for your love and continued partnership in the way of the gospel.